Hey folks, Haskov here. Today I'll be doing the code review for the multi-run Lua script that I've written for the BizHawk emulator. If you're interested on how the code works and how it's written and why it's written the way it is, this is the video for you. Thanks for watching, and I hope this helps illuminate how this works. So we have three capitalized variables: minimum seconds between actions, maximum seconds between actions, and then a variable, which starts as false, which you'll set to true if you want your multiple runs to have separate start locations. And then continuing on, we have a couple functions. The first one is check press, which takes what button I'm checking that's been pressed, the table of every single button that has been pressed this frame, and whether or not it is currently stored as being pressed. So if the button is pressed, then if it hasn't been stored as being pressed earlier, then we say, hey, it's been pressed, return true, true, which the first true is whether or not an action should be performed based upon this button being pressed. The second one is whether or not the button has been pressed at all. Because the next else is if we've registered that it has been pressed prior, then we say do not perform an action, but it's still pressed. And then if the button has not been pressed, then if we say, hey, it's been pressed earlier, then we print that it's been released. And then we say, hey, don't perform an action. Also, the button's not pressed. Continuing on, we have our math to do the pick a random save. So we get the integer of our current save. We have the table in Lua terminology of all of the runs in key value pairs, the keys being the save slot number and the values being the save slot number if it's active. And when you tell the script that the run is complete, the value becomes false. And then the run count is how many runs we're doing this time. We start setting good to false. While good is false, we get our random pick inclusive from 1 to the run count. If the pick is false, which means that run is not currently active, or if the pick is our current run, then we say, well, keep going, try again. If it's not inactive and it's not the current save, then we say, okay, this is a good number, send it out. We print each time we try to pick a number. We initialize our random seed with OS time just to be random. We have the minimum frames calculation, the maximum frames calculations. Here is the initial calculation for when is the first time we are going to shift our states around. Then we store whether or not left has been pressed, whether or not we should be acting upon left, left being the shoulder button. And then we have spelled out left for D-pad and right for the D-pad. So this is left D-pad, this is right D-pad. Storing whether or not it's been saving as pressed and whether or not we're performing an action based upon it. We set the state of the script to start. We store our run frames at 0. We start with 1 run count. We initiate our array as empty. We set the current save number to 0. We set the remaining runs to 1. And then we get into the logic for what we are doing every single frame. We get what buttons have been pressed. We increment our frame count. We check if we need to do something based on the left shoulder button being pressed, the left D-pad and the right D-pad. And then we start based on what state we're in. So we're in the start state. We print how many runs are you doing? And then we print what our current number for run count is. If the left D-pad has an action triggered, then we say, all right, if we're greater than 1, decrement. If the right D-pad is triggered, then if the run count is less than 10, we increment. Then if our left shoulder button has a triggered action, we change the state to set up run, which is the state that says, let's get this run set up, funnily enough. And then we clear the text. We set the remaining runs to the number of runs we've configured. We set the left action to false so that we do not double trigger as we switch states for actions to be performed. because since this could all be done in the same frame, if this carries on down to true, this might be triggered, sort of thing. So if our state is in setup run, then if we are varied, then we check if our current save is 0, which by default it starts there. Then we save a slot that is named start spot. We set the current save to 1, and then we continue on. So then we print up, find a starting point for the current save. We'll start at 1, so it'll say find starting point for 1. And then if we press the left shoulder button, we save the slot of the current number that we're at, increment the current number, and then we load back to the starting spot that we set up here. And then it would loop back around to the next frame, find starting point for number 2 in the next run, and continue that until our current save number becomes larger than the run count. At that point, we load our first slot, set the state to running, reset the run frames to 0. We print to the console that we're starting, and here's when the next action is going to happen. Set the current save to 1, and then we set the left shoulder button to false so we don't get another double trigger instance. If we are not varied, we save a start spot, set the current save to 1, and then for all of them, we just walk through them and save them real quick. We have our batch of runs, load the first one, set it to running, run frame 0, starting next action. Continuing on. So if the state is running, then we're in the meat of the program. So what happens is this is the logic that's going to be running when you're actually playing the runs. So if run frames is greater than the next frame action, so our run frames that are being constantly incremented, if it equals or surpasses when the next action is going to happen, and the remaining runs is greater than 1, so if we have at least 2 things running simultaneously, then we get the random save value, we save our current save, we load the next one, set the current save to our loaded one, reset the run frames, calculate when the next time we're going to perform an action is, and then print that to our console. And then if we press L and the remaining runs is greater than 1, then we say, okay, our current save, we're done, set it to false, get me a new value, save the current run, load the next one, set the current save, decrement the remaining runs, and then finally, if we press the left shoulder button and the remaining runs are 1, we set remaining runs to 0. If remaining runs is 0, we print, congratulations, you did it. Otherwise, we print, here's how many remaining runs you have left. And then at the end of this, we say, all right, advance 1 frame, and then we're done. So that's what the code looks like. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope this helped illuminate how everything was working. Have a great day.